You're watching the PoliticIt Podcast.
Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt Podcast. We've got Dan McCay here today. Dan, nice to have you. It's great to have you back.
You know, it's been a couple weeks, but usually we're sitting closer than this during the session.
Yeah.
It feels a little far away.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So what have you been up to? You've got a race on your hand?
Yeah, I mean, the best part about the Senate is, and we were talking about this earlier, the only thing really I notice as a huge difference between the House and the Senate, especially from the outside looking in, is you get a 4-year term instead of a 2-year term. And
Which is nice.
Which has some benefits, right? Constitutionally, the founders set it up that way so that the accountabilities would be different. The House would have immediate accountability. Every 2 years, there would be up for election, and there would be, those conversations. And then, and the Senate spread things out. And what that means is usually the Senate is only half the Senate's up for election every 2 years. And because only half is elected, only half is feels the pressure of the voter or something.
Right.
I guess that's a theory of it. In some ways, what it's supposed to do is, take those policies that might be knee-jerk reactions and force them to be administrable or, whatever it may be, and kind of really push on the process and the policies that come forward and make sure that, that it's administrable and that things work, and the food fight, so to speak, element that
Right.
can happen, that it actually turns into a meal.
Yeah. No, so Dan, this is strange, right? Going into this election, you've got someone running against you.
Yeah.
That I don't understand what's driving that.
I wish I understood it, to be honest. I've got, I got support in the House. I got support in the Senate, we're, and things come and go. But I tell you, ambition and friendship are terrible mixtures, right? One of my opponents, I would call a friend until, we called and said, well, I don't really care about friendship. I want to be a senator, and I'm going to run to be the next senator. I know he has aspirations for higher office, like governor or U.S. senator, and it's a stepping stone thing for him. I get it, right?
Right.
Ambition is a very laudable quality. It's gotten America where we are in a lot of ways. So I take nothing away from that. And this is the people's seat. None of these seats in the legislature or Congress or whatever, none of them belong to to the individual sitting in it at the time. So yeah, let the people decide. And look, if this as much as I do, as much as the legislature gets the the bad rap or the social media component of you hear it every once in a while of self-enrichment or whatever it is. For all of us, it is service.
Right.
And that's really what this job is an opportunity to serve. And some people, they serve in their local cannery, they serve in their church ward, or they serve, in a homeless kitchen, or there are lots of ways to serve. And this is just another opportunity to serve. You put your principles out there, and if people like and support you and the things you've done, then great, they'll vote for you. And if not, there are other ways to serve,
Right.
Maybe a mission, maybe there are other things, right? And,
Right.
And I've talked about all of them because, as any service job is, the time commitment and everything else. And that's the other part of the Senate I think most people don't realize. when I went from the House to the Senate, I of course was respectful, and I waited for the senator before me to step down.
Right.
And when he told me he was going to step down, he had joked about it. He's like,
so who was that?
It was Howard Stevenson.
Okay.
Yeah, Howard Stevenson. And he had joked about it. He's like, well, just someday I may step down, and you might consider running, but that's not going to be anytime soon. He was always telling me stuff like that.
Right.
And so I just said, well, let's just keep working in the House. And I enjoyed being policy oriented, working in the House. And he comes over the last night of the session on 2018 and says, hey, I got everything I wanted to get done, and I feel like now's a good time for me to retire. The filing deadline was 8 a.m., or the filing starting was 8 a.m. the next morning. And so I spent that night, it was like 11:30 or something like that. It was close to the end of the night. And, in the House, when people leave, they, there's like a testimony meeting, weird way afterwards, right? Where everybody stands up and talks about the privilege and honor of serving, and then, everybody claps for them, and then, they figure out the next one. When the filing deadline was after the session, by the way, it was better because, people could do that and not be lame ducks, so to speak, right? Now, this is the first time I've experienced where the filing deadline was before the legislative session. I got to be honest, it wasn't that helpful for the body. We can talk about that in a minute.
Right.
But, I waited for Howard Stevenson to retire and then ran in 2018 and got elected to the Senate. And, I have enjoyed the service. And I did a lot of soul searching this last year and decided I would run again. It took me a while longer. I got to November or something like that. And that might have encouraged, people to say, hey, well, McCay hasn't said anything about running. What are we going to do? And so, that was, maybe that spurred it on too, but who knows?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to, when you think about that, but what are you going to do now?
Well, right now I'm going to talk to my friend John Johnson on his podcast, PoliticIt. But really, I'm setting up. It's campaign season, so just meet with delegates and talk to delegates about things they're concerned about. I actually really love the caucus convention process. One of my favorite things. Everybody always talks about, hey, you got to stack the caucuses. You got to get your friends to run and your supporters. And that's something I have never done. And the reason for not doing that, I just feel like that's antithetical to what the process is supposed to be. I feel like the process is supposed to be people get elected on caucus night because their neighbors thought they could do the job, or they were available to do the job. And they listened to, a speech or whatever it may be and talked about that, and their neighbors supported them. And then I get a chance to go out and meet 130, 140 new people and try and convince them to support me for state senator. I love that process. Getting to know people. I've gotten to know just new issues, things. As a guy that he's not far from me. He's a Dodgers fan, but I forgive that part of it. But he just talks about the difficulty of being a contractor for the state when the general contractor 1099s employees, and talks about this unique process of how they're not covered by workers' comp and some of the other issues that you're like, well, these are state contracts. And so you're trying to dig through and listen to concerns like that, and you're trying to figure out, wow, because this. An issue comes up and you get to decide, am I going to own this and start working on making it better?
Right.
And it's issues like that make it super fascinating.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
And we'll come right back.
Tired of media bias? Frustrated by political noise? PoliticIt.com cuts through the clutter, giving you real facts, clear analysis, and unbiased insight on the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay empowered. Whether it's elections, policy changes, or breaking news, we've got you covered. No spin, no agendas, just truth you can trust. Visit PoliticIt.com today, because informed citizens shape the future. PoliticIt.com, where politics meets clarity.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. We've got Dan McCay here. Dan, it's really great to have you. you know, I mean, we've sat next to each other for a while, right? And
we talk a lot.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing, is like, I can always tell when John's had enough of me, you know, like, we'll be debating an issue or a bill, and he just needs a break sometimes, so his chair will turn this way. It's like, he'll do one of these, or it turns that way. He's like, hey, Dan, I've got to focus on whatever it might be. You got a bill to review or that kind of thing. I just always love that.
So
you're a good seatmate, in other words.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but so we were talking about this idea of popular versus what is it that drives you?
Well, goodness, I think back to, and the first time I got involved in politics at all, back in 2010, it was a bunch of people showed up. Like, caucus night was packed that night. Like, I think we had like 50 people in my precinct or something like that. And we were trying to select state delegates. And I showed up just because somebody told me what it was and, come get involved. So I went to caucus night.
This was before you ran.
I wasn't in office or anything. And I was like, well, I'm going to go to caucus night. In fact, it might have been, if I remember right, I'm just trying to think, it might have been they read the letter over the pulpit that said, hey, caucus night is this Tuesday, and, go to the high school. But I hadn't been. So 2010, show up and we sit and, I tell people I'm interested in being a state delegate, and for no other reason, but I was like, I want to learn the process. And so I did and got elected, and, yada, yada, yada. 2 years later, I ran for the House and won. But, in that process, what I learned was most important to me. I was watching that 2010 convention, the difference between the candidates for U.S. Senate. And I really appreciated a politician that was transparent, and, principled, and just stuck with their beliefs and their core principles and said, this is, what matters. And for that reason, I was a Mike Lee supporter from then. Then there was the primary for after convention. I went and helped put up yard signs for Mike Lee. And I just really felt like that was the kind of person, if I was ever in politics, or in office, that's the kind of person I would be, is I would focus on principle. What that tends to mean is you get up to your neck in policy and trying to, move a policy towards, better principle. And the hardest part about that, honestly, and this because I watch you wrestle with it too, there are things that, what's happening. That's the current condition. And then there's the goal state, which is, the principle, right? And then trying to get from what's happening to that goal state of principle, it's not easy because, when you move towards principle, like smaller government, like spend less money, like, make sure you don't regulate first. Like, regulate is like the last option when you're trying to deal with, society's ills. And when you're trying to wrestle through, principles like that, it really is private property rights,
Right.
It really is hard because people like where things are right now, and it's more popular than getting to the principle of smaller government or, whatever transparency measure or whatever. And that popular side of things, I think, is the number one struggle today for lawmakers, is really trying to understand the balance between the policy, present condition, where the goal state is from a policy standpoint, and how to navigate the popularity of restoring to principle. In my opinion, that has proven to become more difficult than it was before, because we are subject. Social media nowadays, it has gotten to, and I look at this on my own videos and things like that I post. People are paying attention for maybe 9 to 15 seconds.
Right.
That's it. And so you're trying to jam as much as you can from a principled standpoint into 10 to 15 seconds. If you can't do it, it's going to be hard. Long form reading, long form policy. I think of the Federalist Papers, right? There is no way
we could have that level of debate.
Hamilton and Madison would never have been successful today with that level of debate because of the nuance that's required through every one of those arguments, right? It's why I worry about, constitutional conventions or what, where they meet, because I don't think we could have the debate to get to better principle. I just not sure that that's something that we're capable of doing now. It's really interesting. And you answer hard questions, even being pro-life or being pro-choice today is nuanced for most people. There are some who, despite, we passed the abortion ban with the exceptions of rape, incest, and health of the mother, but there are some who feel like that's not enough. And then there's some who feel like there's, that spectrum. And I will just say that finding that right balance to get to principle, to ideally protect life, it's not as easy as it used to be, it feels like.
So how do we get back to that?
Well, I don't know. What I've found as I think about these things,
right?
What I find is that you've got to show, and we have to show, how good principles are working. Okay, and let's take Prop 4 for example. Okay. If I asked people in an initiative, would you ever give up your say in how maps are drawn so that a third party would draw the maps for us and you would have no say in that? The people would never vote for that.
Right.
Right? Like if that was the question that's asked. But that wasn't the question that was asked. The question was much more nuanced, very long, and I would guess that maybe 10%, and I'm being very, very generous, maybe 10% read the statutory language in there. And I would say even less than that knew that the chief judge of the Chief Justice of the Utah Supreme Court would decide which map to use if there was a disagreement between this unelected body and the legislature, right? Like that was never talked about in any of the language leading up to up to Prop 4. And prophetically, if you remember, our late colleague now, Senator Ralph Okerlund, said, this proposition, and this is, I'm going to do best to quote him, this proposition is a one-way street to lengthy litigation that results in a judge picking the maps. That's what he said in his rebuttal of the thing.
Right.
And
that's exactly what happened.
And that has come true, right? But I think now, this is why I think, as we look at this policy going forward, I think we're in a better position now to have a conversation about the strength of the Republic and the strength of the voice of Utah citizens as it relates to initiatives. I think we're in a better position to have that conversation now than we were 3 years ago, because I think the people have seen the result of what happens when there's this fight between balance of powers. And I do not hear a lot of support these days for we should have an unelected body decide and make decisions for the state of Utah on these maps. I just, the idea of getting rid of bias is not possible. So all we're doing is substituting an unknown bias for a known bias. I'll take known bias.
Right.
And that shows, though, that we have to have the fight, right, in the public, and everybody has to come up to speed, and we have to, these are lengthy conversations. And once we have all those conversations, which we've been having, then we can try to restore to principle. And I feel like in a lot of ways, that's the cure.
We're probably better off now than we were.
Yeah, and I feel like having greater public conversation, greater public input, greater public involvement in all of these things, I feel like that is going to make the process better, and it will make our Republic of Utah better. And it will honestly make the Republic of our country better. And I'm looking forward to more of those conversations really being had, so that the people recognize the strength of the principle. And that's the problem with the immigration debate. You can go down every single malady we have where the government is not fulfilling the responsibility of the public, and every single one of them comes down to the policy that was set up failed to meet the principle, and because it failed to meet the principle, everybody starts making exceptions to be popular. And when you start making a bunch of exceptions to be popular, you get to where we are now, where you see a nation that has never been more divided. You've got a Supreme Court that is now loaded to try and make a decision on, natural birth, citizenship, and all of this fight is valuable. And this is the one thing I constantly have to tell people is like, oh, it seems so contentious. I'm like, thank goodness it's contentious. Thank goodness. The moment we stop fighting is the moment we lose. Our system, our congressional system, our balance of powers, it is all set up so that we will fight in the halls of the Capitol to prevent fights out on the streets. And I love those type of principles. And the more and more we as elected officials or citizens have a chance to talk about and discover principle and learn for ourselves the principles involved, the system that was set up in the United States and is set up in Utah, because we mirror our system, much like the federal system in some ways. That system is a miracle of thought. And the more we respect it and respect the process that goes into it, the better off we will be in the long term. That is the reason why we are one of the longest surviving, republic democracies. This is one of the reasons. It's because they had all the wisdom and experience from the flawed systems that came before, and now we stand on their shoulders. And I feel like, to your point, a return to principle is always going to be valuable. And we could do it in every single situation. And I believe it will make us better as a country and make us better as a state.
Right. Well, we're about out of time.
I'm sorry I talked so long there. But...
No. So why don't you just conclude by looking in the camera and telling people why Dan McCay?
Okay.
Why you at this time?
Well, I am an effective fighter for principle and for good policy. And for the state of Utah, I think if you look at my track record, you don't see a long list of lobbyist-oriented bills with agendas or whatever it may be. What you will see is a lawmaker who for 14 years has been fighting to make the process more principled, more transparent, and better and more responsive to you. There are very few people left on the Capitol Hill that understand tax. And I feel like that is a responsibility I have taken on from my predecessors. I stand on their shoulders. And you see in tax the push to do things that are popular all the time. And in ways, it is antithetical to policy, or antithetical to principle. And when you do it, all you do in the long term is you end up hurting your taxpayers more than you do help them. And this push for reducing income tax is purposeful. Income tax is the worst tax of all of them that we pay. And let me tell you why. Income tax, after you pay it, every other tax is a double tax, right? 2, think about what you have to disclose to the government so that you can pay your income tax. You have to tell them everything, right? And so look at the privacy compromise plus the double tax component. Those are the things that I look at from a standpoint for taxation fairness. I'd like to continue this fight. If we're going to remain competitive, we have got to get our income tax rate below 4%. And that is a mission that I am on, and I hope that people will join me in that quest.
Thank you, Dan McCay.
Thanks for having me, John.
We'll see you next week.